The library was supposed to be the safest place in the school, quiet, dusted with sunlight, and filled with the soft promise of learning. But that afternoon it felt like a trap closing in. Stay with this story until the very end, because what happened in those narrow aisles didn't just change one teacher's life. It exposed a truth no one expected. Ms. Evelyn Carter, the new teacher with calm eyes and a gentle voice, had come early to organize lesson plans. The bell hadn't rung yet. The building hummed with distant lockers and muffled laughter. Then the laughter grew closer, sharper. A trio of seniors slipped between the shelves, swaggering confidence stitched into their steps. They blocked the aisle, towering, smirking, pushing the air from the room. A book slid from Evelyn's hands and thudded to the carpet. Before she could step back, a shoulder pressed in front of her, another behind. She wasn't grabbed in a way that could be laughed off. She was pinned, hemmed in by shelves and bodies, breath shortening as the aisle became a wall. Her heart raced, not with fear alone, but with the sting of disbelief. This was a school, and she was an adult, and yet here she was treated like prey. The boys sneered, testing how far they could go with words and posture, leaning close to invade space, daring her to panic. Evelyn steadied her breathing. She remembered the first day she walked into this building, the principal's hurried handshake, the sideways glances that followed her down the hall. New teacher. Quiet. An easy target, they thought. But beneath her composed exterior, Evelyn was calculating angles, exits, timing, skills she'd learned long before a chalkboard ever entered her life. She shifted her stance a fraction, heels planted, shoulders relaxed, eyes lifted. Not defiant, not pleading, observant. One boy laughed too loudly, a performance for the others. Another tapped the shelf, rattling books, testing how silence could be bent into power. Evelyn felt the pressure increase, but she refused to shrink. Her mind flashed back to nights of training, to instructors who taught her that panic was the first thing to defeat. She counted heartbeats. She noticed the faint reflection of their movements in the glass of a framed poster at the aisle's end. She listened for footsteps. The library clock ticked, each second a drumbeat. A teacher's badge rested cool against her collarbone. She thought of the students who trusted her, the ones who came to her class early because they felt seen. The boys leaned in again, smug, certain. Evelyn spoke then, calm, measured, asking them to step aside. Her voice didn't tremble. It cut through the aisle like a line drawn in chalk. For a moment, confusion flickered across their faces. They hadn't expected that. The nearest boy scoffed and leaned closer, and in that instant, something changed. Evelyn's calm sharpened into resolve. She shifted her weight again, subtle as a breath, lining her center with the narrow gap between shelves. The library felt smaller, tighter, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Outside, the bell rang. Late students hurried past, but no one looked down the aisle. The boys grinned, thinking the moment belonged to them. They were wrong. Because the quiet teacher they'd cornered wasn't cornered at all. She was choosing her moment. If you want stories where courage turns the tables, like the video and subscribe to the channel. And don't blink, because what Evelyn does next will make them regret ever touching her. The moment stretched thin, like glass about to crack. Evelyn felt it, the shift from threat to action, not as panic, but as clarity. The boys mistook her stillness for surrender. That mistake would cost them. She inhaled slowly, letting the noise of the school blur into the background, and centered herself the way she'd been taught, spine aligned, weight balanced, eyes soft but alert. When the nearest boy leaned closer again, crowding her space with a smirk meant to intimidate, Evelyn moved. Not fast, not slow, but precise. She slid one foot back just enough to create a pocket of space, then raised her forearm defensively, not striking, simply placing it between them, a boundary drawn in motion. The boy scoffed and tried to push past it. That was all the confirmation she needed. Evelyn pivoted her hips and redirected his momentum sideways into the shelf, not with force but with timing. Books rattled. The sound was sharp, startling. The boy stumbled, surprised more than hurt, and his laughter cut off mid-breath. "Back away," Evelyn said, louder now, not shouting, but projecting. The words carried authority, the kind that didn't ask permission. The other two reacted with a rush of bravado. One stepped forward, hands raised in mock surrender, while the third hovered behind, eyes darting toward the aisle entrance. Evelyn clocked it all. She kept her hands open, palms visible, non-threatening to anyone who might see, but her stance widened a fraction, grounded. She knew the library cameras wouldn't catch everything between the shelves. She also knew she had seconds before curiosity turned into witnesses. The boy with raised hands lunged suddenly, trying to crowd her again, hoping size alone would overwhelm. Evelyn shifted off the line of attack and used his forward motion against him, guiding his shoulder past her with a turn that put him off balance. He caught himself on the shelf, knocking a stack of paperbacks to the floor. The sound echoed down the aisle like dropped dominoes. "Are you serious?" he snapped, embarrassed now, anger creeping in. "Yes," Evelyn replied, one word. "Calm, certain." The third boy saw under his breath and moved to block the aisle behind her. Evelyn noted the narrowing exit and adjusted, half a step toward the end cap where light spilled in from the main reading area. She wanted visibility, she wanted witnesses, she wanted the truth to land where it could be seen. A voice cut through the tension, distant female calling for quiet, a librarian. The boys froze, calculating. Evelyn seized the moment. She lifted her voice again, steady and clear. "Step away from me." Now, that did it. The librarian's footsteps grew closer, keys jangling. One boy backed up too quickly and clipped a chair, cursing. Another shot Evelyn a look that mixed fury and confusion. How had this gone wrong so fast? They retreated a step, then another, bravado draining away. But the first boy, the one who'd stumbled into the shelf, wasn't ready to let it go. He pointed at Evelyn, face flushed. "You think you're tough?" he sneered, trying to salvage pride. "You think?" "I think," Evelyn interrupted, her voice slicing through his sentence, "that you've made a serious mistake." The librarian appeared at the aisle's mouth, eyes widening at the scene, scattered books, chairs askew. 3 students hovering too close to a teacher whose posture screamed composure under pressure. Evelyn met the librarian's gaze and nodded once. No dramatics, no accusations, just presence. "What's going on here?" the librarian demanded. The boys spoke at once, tripping over excuses. Evelyn didn't argue. She didn't need to. She simply said, "I was organizing materials." They blocked the aisle and refused to step back. Silence followed, the kind that settles when truth lands heavy. The librarian straightened. "Office." Now, as the boys shuffled away, the first one shot Evelyn a last glare. She held his gaze, not with anger, but with something colder certainty. He looked away first. When the aisle finally emptied, Evelyn exhaled for the first time in minutes. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline. She crouched to gather the fallen books, fingers steadying as she stacked them neatly. The librarian hovered nearby, concern softening her voice. "Are you okay?" "Yes," Evelyn said, and she meant it. Later, in the principal's office, the story unraveled further. The boys' accounts contradicted each other. Cameras showed them entering the library together, lingering too long between shelves. Evelyn's statement was concise, factual, unembellished. The principal's jaw tightened as the picture became clear. Consequences followed. Detentions, calls home, warnings that would echo longer than they expected. But for Evelyn, the day wasn't over. She returned to her classroom with the bell, greeted by a roomful of students who sensed something had happened, though they didn't know what. She taught anyway, voice steady, lessons flowing, because resilience isn't loud, it's consistent. That evening, alone again, Evelyn allowed herself to sit with what had occurred. She thought about power, how easily it's abused, how quickly it can be reclaimed when met with resolve. She thought about the quiet students who watched the world carefully, learning who they could trust. And she promised herself something important: she wouldn't shrink. Not tomorrow, not ever. Because what the bullies learned in that library wasn't just that they'd crossed a line. It was that the woman they'd underestimated knew exactly who she was, and the school was about to learn it too. By the next morning, the school felt different to Evelyn. Not quieter, not calmer, but sharper, as if every hallway carried a memory of what had nearly happened. Whispers followed her steps, not cruel, just curious. News traveled fast in a building full of teenagers. She caught fragments as she passed lockers, library office, detention. Evelyn didn't slow down. She walked with the same composed rhythm she always had, shoulders relaxed, chin level, refusing to let rumor define her. In her classroom, sunlight fell across rows of desks, and for a moment she stood there, hands resting lightly on the lectern, grounding herself before the bell rang. When it did, students poured in, some laughing, some exhausted, some unusually quiet. A few looked at her with a new expression, respect mixed with relief. Midway through the lesson, a hand rose at the back. "Miss Carter," a student asked carefully. "Are you okay?" The room stilled. Evelyn met the student's eyes and smiled, small but genuine. "Yes," she said. "Thank you for asking." The class exhaled together, tension easing. She returned to the board, chalk tapping softly, and continued as if courage were just another subject on the syllabus, something learned through practice. During lunch, the counselor stopped by with paperwork and a gentle voice. Protocols were discussed. Safety plans were reviewed. Evelyn listened, nodded, and signed where needed. But what stayed with her wasn't the bureaucracy. It was the counselor's quiet admission. "You handled that better than most people would have." Evelyn didn't boast. She didn't deflect. She simply replied, "I had to. Because sometimes doing what's necessary is the truest form of strength." That afternoon, she spotted one of the boys in the hallway, the one who'd tried to block her exit. He kept his eyes down, shoulders hunched, bravado gone. Evelyn didn't gloat. She stepped aside to let him pass, offering nothing more than space. The lesson had already landed. Power reclaimed doesn't need to announce itself. After school, the principal called her in again, not for discipline this time, but for acknowledgement. "We're reviewing supervision in common areas," he said, "and thank you for your professionalism." He paused, searching for words. "If you need time, I'm staying." Evelyn replied, gently but firmly, "My students need consistency." The principal nodded, understanding that resolve when he heard it. As the building emptied, Evelyn returned to the library. Not out of defiance, but intention. She walked the aisles slowly, fingers brushing spines, breathing in the familiar scent of paper and polish. The same shelves, the same light. Different meaning now. She chose a table near the window and sat, organizing tomorrow's materials with deliberate care. Reclaiming a space isn't about erasing what happened. It's about standing where you were tested and choosing not to be defined by fear. A librarian passed and offered a soft smile. "You're welcome here," she said. Evelyn returned the smile, grateful. At home that evening, Evelyn finally let the day catch up to her. She brewed tea, sat by the window, and allowed the adrenaline to fade. Memories surfaced, not just of the library, but of years spent learning control, restraint, and response. She thought of mentors who taught her that strength isn't loud, that the calmest voice often carries the most authority. She thought of her students again, the ones who watched, who learned without a lesson being spoken. By nightfall, messages arrived from parents thanking her for creating a safe classroom. One note stood out, short and earnest. "My daughter says you make her feel brave." Evelyn closed her eyes, emotion tightening her chest. Not pain, but purpose. Tomorrow would bring another bell, another lesson, another chance to model what dignity looks like under pressure. The bullies had tried to pin her down in silence. Instead, they'd awakened something visible, an understanding that quiet does not mean weak, and composure is not permission. Evelyn slept that night knowing the hardest part wasn't what she'd done, it was choosing to return. And she would, again and again, until courage felt ordinary in the halls where it was most needed. The following week unfolded with a steadiness that felt earned. Not perfect, schools never are, but grounded. Evelyn noticed the small shifts. First, the librarian's desk moved closer to the stacks. Hall monitors lingered longer near blind corners, and teachers exchanged looks that said, "We're watching now." Safety wasn't a slogan anymore. It was a shared responsibility. Evelyn kept teaching, kept listening, kept showing up, and showing up, she knew, was its own kind of courage. One afternoon, a knock came at her classroom door after the bell. It was the principal, accompanied by the counselor and one of the boys. He stood rigid, eyes fixed on the floor. The room held its breath. The counselor spoke gently. inviting him to say what he'd practiced. He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," he said, voice rough. For cornering you. It was wrong." The words weren't perfect, but they were real. Evelyn nodded once. "Thank you for saying that," she replied. "Make better choices next time. No lecture. No spectacle. Accountability, then release." The boy left lighter than he'd arrived. That evening, Evelyn attended the school's open house. Parents shook her hand. Students introduced siblings. A shy freshman lingered until the room thinned, then stepped forward. "Ms. Carter," she said softly. "When I'm scared, I remember how calm you were." Evelyn's throat tightened. She placed a reassuring hand over her heart. "Calm is something you can learn," she said. "It's already in you." The girl smiled and walked away taller. Weeks passed. The library returned to its hush, but something invisible had changed. The quiet places felt guarded, not by fear but by awareness. Evelyn found joy in the ordinary again, a breakthrough essay, a debate that sparked laughter during group work. She also found herself mentoring younger teachers, sharing strategies for setting boundaries and trusting intuition. She didn't frame it as heroism. She framed it as preparation. On a bright Friday, the school announced a new initiative, student-led safety ambassadors, supported by faculty. The idea wasn't punishment, it was prevention. Evelyn watched the sign-up sheet fill quickly. The students wanted to protect what mattered. She realized then that the ripple from that afternoon in the library had traveled farther than she'd imagined. After the final bell, Evelyn walked back to the library one last time before the weekend. Sunlight poured through the windows, dust motes drifting like stars. She stood in the aisle where it had happened, placed a book back on the shelf, and smiled. Not because the memory was gone, but because it no longer held power. She had reclaimed the space, the story, and herself. As she left, the librarian called after her, "See you Monday." Evelyn nodded. "See you." Because courage isn't a single act. It's a practice. It's choosing calm when chaos offers itself. It's setting boundaries without becoming hard. It's teaching by example, even when no lesson plan covers it. The bullies had tried to pin a quiet teacher in silence. Instead, they learned that silence can be strong, and strength, when used wisely, lifts everyone around it. If this story moved you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful, inspiring stories.